Hey everyone, we have our newest expert back for the week. Matt, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So
Good.
people really loved your story, right? The high school
Awesome.
dropout made good, do the work, learn your market, all of those things. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do three things every Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific. We're going to take three topics and we're just going to go and we're going to riff. So the first
Okay.
one is you and I probably had the same thought when the national lockdown happened, right? Unemployment spiked, 2.3 trillion dollar this or that. I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
forbearance is going to crush people.
Yes.
I know at the end of, I know, yeah, 90 days free may feel free until day 91, right?
Hmm.
There was all of these things that we experienced in the last run up that we both thought initially banks were going to be like, yeah, we'll help you.
Right.
And then they'll take from you.
Right.
And I think what we've seen over the last 9 months is first that fear was probably, well, it was wrong,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
We had a knee jerk reaction because of our past experience.
Sure.
And I don't think there's any question that banks are, at least with the residential, I think there's an argument in commercial, but let's stay in residential,
Sure.
that they are acting entirely different than last time. So let's go back. Because we've only done this a couple of times. Let's go back to kind of March. What were you thinking when you heard about forbearance and all of that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, just like what you said, which is, kick the can down the road and get ready because there's no free lunch, right?
Yeah.
And that's what scared me the most about that whole concept, which was I totally agree. There needed to be intervention.
Yes.
And I think that was a very smart thing to do, because it could have gotten very bad very fast with so many people shuttering. And so I think it made a lot of sense. I mean, it really, I know, for us, when we looked at that process, we just said, you know what, this is the right thing to do right now.
Yeah.
And I think, as I look at it though, kind of then as you mature through the process, there are things in place now today where those loans are still in forbearance.
Hmm. For sure.
17%, over 17% of FHA loans right now are in forbearance.
Yeah.
And 11.5% thereabouts of those loans are in serious delinquency, which means more than 90 days.
Hmm.
So what that's showing me is that there's still new people getting onto forbearance,
Hmm.
but that there's also that core that's well over 90 days that has been there for quite some time. I think
Yeah.
the interesting thing is how do you get off of that trajectory, right?
Yeah.
How do you get off of those forbearances and what does that then look like?
Yeah. I think this is a conversation I'd love to have with you because I've been debating this with all these other freaking YouTube entertainers who I think are just wrong. But maybe I'm wrong. It happens. My wife tells me I'm wrong almost
Possible.
every day. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm used to it. So
Yep.
let's just say there are 3.2, let's call it 4 million. What the hell? Round up to
Sure.
4 million. 4
Sure.
million loans in forbearance.
Yep.
And again, the thing we need to realize is yes, they may have not made a payment in 90 days, but a forbearance means there's agreement from the lender and the lendee, right? The borrower.
Mhm.
So not technically, legally, they're not a day late.
Yep. Right.
Legally, they're
Correct.
not a day late,
You're correct. Yep.
right?
You're correct.
So again, you and I experienced the last crisis, and at
We did.
least in California, it was over 700 days to process a foreclosure.
It was,
1,200 in Vegas, 1,400 in New York last time.
yeah, much faster in New Hampshire.
Okay.
I mean, our state motto is live free or die, if
Ah,
that gives you any indication.
there
So
you
it's
go.
good to be a landlord in this state,
Okay.
because they recognize that the biggest amount of money that drives the economy here is property taxes,
Got it.
because we don't have an income tax, we don't have a sales tax,
Oh,
and because of that, the state really depends on those property dollars, those property tax dollars. And
interesting.
so, who pays property taxes?
Yeah.
The owners.
Yeah.
And you can't pay the property tax or the mortgage, which, if you don't have any income coming in.
Right.
So they made it a better process, one that was more achievable or more reasonable with the banks.
Mm-hmm.
There were some, that whole robo signing thing, remember that?
Oh,
And
I
that was
do.
with some of the banks,
Yeah.
but that was with a lot of banks that don't have an East Coast presence. Like Wells Fargo is a little bit out here, but not a lot.
Right. Okay.
And so just kind of looking at that process, I think that it will be interesting to see kind of what they do. But yeah, there was that amount of foreclosures. There were the short sales. I
Yeah.
did a number of short sales. There weren't a ton of foreclosures that I did, but I did a few.
Yeah. The reason I was bringing that up, because again, the first argument is when these people come off forbearance, they're going to be late. No, they're not late. They're
No,
not a day late.
nope,
Right.
exactly,
So
exactly.
at least in California, I don't know New Hampshire, it takes 90 days before you can file an NOD, notice of default. Right.
Okay.
So that's a quarter.
Yep.
Then I think it's 100 days, or it might be 120 days before you can go to court, because you got to do workouts and you got to do all this bullshit.
Yep.
So even if the process is run smoothly and there's no delays, it's 7 months
Yes.
from the first missed payment.
Yep.
Right? Which is like 8 months.
Right. So I believe, and so I think it's pretty close to that in New Hampshire. I just think it can expedite on the back end of that.
Sure.
So I don't think you're running much past that. So I think you might be 180 to 240 days, but you're not 500, 700, et cetera.
Yeah. So the reason I wanted to bring this up, because let's just assume it's 200 days, right? So it's
Yep.
three quarters of a year. If your forbearance period ends in March, that foreclosure, assuming it forecloses, doesn't even show up till 2022.
You're exactly right. Yep.
Right.
You're exactly
So
right.
all these people talking about this inventory wave coming of foreclosures, you don't know math.
Nope.
Right.
Nope.
It just doesn't work. That's probably why short sales were a big deal in New Hampshire, because that will happen.
That's right.
Foreclosures. Okay.
Well, the other thing to think about too, Mike, and this is one thing that I think people are missing. So everyone says, oh, look, well, then people can just put their house on the market and sell it. Right. So I think we both agree that your costs around selling that house are probably around 8%.
Sure. All in. Yep.
If you haven't paid your mortgage for a year, that's probably about 10%.
Could be.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So now all of a sudden you need to have appreciated 18% just to get back to zero.
Yeah.
Now there will be some things like that.
Sure.
But when that stuff starts to hit, and you and I are in agreement, I think it's going to be Q4, maybe Q1 of 21. Right. I mean, 22, excuse me.
Right.
And that's without having any idea what the incoming political administration is going to do. No idea.
Yeah. But I think there's a couple of things we can count on. First and foremost, the banks are acting entirely different than last time. Right.
Yes.
When I freaked out in March, it was like, oh my God, I've been here before. I've seen how nasty banks could be. Right. I've just seen it.
Yep.
They're not acting anyway like that. So the first thing, so let's go back to the 4 million, because this whole 4 million thing is thrown around like it's gospel. And I've done the math, and I think there's only 600 to 800 real problem children in there. So let's just walk the math, right? Mm-hmm. So in the 4 million, it has nothing to do with equity. You could have bought your house a decade ago.
That's right.
And lost your job and not be able to pay. You could have bought your house 15 years ago, kept your job, and just called up and said you don't want to pay, right? So there are so I think there's a percentage of people that have their job that took a payment holiday because they were nervous or they could.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Agreed.
Then there's a significant portion of folks who have 30, 40 or more % equity.
Right.
That, if they have to sell, they'll sell.
That's right.
And then there is probably the largest percentage of the people that have had 6 or 9 months of no job that ultimately get a job by the time the forbearance period ends. And by everything I have read is, if you are employed when the forbearance period ends, they will create a second, stick it on the back with 0% interest, only make that payable if you sell or you pay off your first.
Yeah.
So you take those three things, you just whack that 4 million, whack 400 grand gone, whack 800 grand. And pretty soon you're left with, sub 1 million homes. And then what I think is you're only going to have a true crisis in a couple of cities, Vegas,
Agreed.
Orlando, right? Really very vacation, hotel, convention markets.
Yeah.
And then, because after that point, you throw more inventory into Fresno, it'll be gone in a minute, right? We have less than a month's supply.
Right.
It's just not going to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And I think that that's the thing is, the businessman side of me looking at it saying, wow, there's going to be a lot of opportunity out there. And now as the years passed, as the 9 months has passed since March, it looks like a very, very different picture. Heavy intervention from the government. And that what does that do? That kicks the can down the road until, like you said, the working with banks and talking to banks now, I just looked at our numbers for December. We were 98.2% collected.
Wow. For December.
Yeah, for December.
Wow. That was actually December. This last December was my worst month. We actually got to 95.4, I think. And again, we had a couple of vacancies. We're a point lower than last year.
But to that end though, that's 1 point, right?
Yeah.
That's negligible. That's
you can deal with 1 point. Yeah. Let's be clear. I was expecting 20 points.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's the thing. I mean, we were preparing ourselves for what is that, what does that look like? What if we're at 75% and one out of four can't pay? If we were at 75%. And so we were kind of looking at those numbers. So yeah, I think in a lot of cases, I agree with you. I think the banks have certainly changed. Yeah. Obviously the government's the backstop to that because a lot of those are FHA mortgages.
For sure.
I think the bigger pinch is going to be in the actual municipalities.
Correct.
And their taxes and their incomes and what do they do to run the city the way that they used to run it in the past.
Yeah.
I think that's where there's going to be a huge pinch, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens there, because I think a lot of cities do a very good job of running themselves pretty fiscally responsible. Exactly right.
Yeah, I'm in California. That don't happen.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's funny because in New Hampshire, there's a lot of cities that do a really good job. And then there's some that are just out of control where it's like, why are we doing another high school again, type of thing.
Yeah.
But it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. And that's what I'm most interested to see, kind of where that happens, because I agree with you. I think that the administration is going to come in. I think that there is going to be plans around that forbearance process. And I think that a lot less hits the market. I think it's really going to come down to, believe it or not, I think it's really going to come down to jobs.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think so. A, the forbearance is not going to be the opportunity I thought it would be.
Agreed.
B, it's not going to be the time frame I thought it was going to be early on.
Yep.
The other thing I think that's going to be very interesting, talking about the new administration, is I think they're going to be pro two things. I think they're going to be pro housing ownership.
Yep.
So, I mean, get this. Not only do I think they're going to make sure everybody, as many people win as possible. Right. There'll be the few people that, hey, you're out of work, you can't work, you got them. I mean, there'll be some people that lose in this, but most people will be okay, if not come out well. So I think, but they're going to go after home ownership. And the thing that really freaks me out, this actually freaks me out, is I could see him doing a $15K first time home buyer tax credit year one.
That would be such a horribly bad idea.
I agree.
You never, ever, ever overstimulate something that's already overstimulated.
Yeah.
We have more buyers, we have less inventory, so let's throw more money at it. That's, horrible. And because here's the problem. The reason why you and I don't want to see that happen is because we're fine. We already own property.
Yeah,
fine.
Exactly. It would actually do a good thing for my net worth. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. You and I would be like, this is great. Look at all the extra money that we're going to see coming in, because now we can sell stuff because it's going to have an artificial layer on top of it.
Yeah. I did that last time.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing is that $15,000, I feel bad for everyday people, because anybody that's going to have access to that 15, that's going to create this artificial, number in the market. And we all know if you're getting 15, there's other people that are more ready than you that are also getting the 15 and they're going to be able to buy, but it's going to push up the price, not 15. It's going to push up the price 25 or 30
or 40 or 50. Because again, the 15 could become your down payment, your tax credit. And pretty soon, it would be
horrible.
I don't say this lightly. It could be the worst government decision I've ever seen.
Agreed.
That's how, because I don't see a bubble forming today, because again, it's about payment, not price.
Right.
But dude, you throw this in next year with interest rate sub 3%.
Yeah. Well, and then what about the rest of America that did a pretty good job living through COVID and keeping their house, and there's nothing there for them? It's like, this is just a slippery slope. I don't like seeing things like that thrown into a market, especially one that's overheated with short supply.
Yeah. And again, the $8,000 tax credit they did in whatever it was, 9, 10, whatever it was, that was genius.
Yep.
Right. Inventory was rising 10 or 15% a month. Prices were falling 5%. You had to pull in demand. Genius.
That's right.
That would not be the market we're in today. I'm just saying.
Slightly different market. Yeah. And that's the
Slightly
thing is, I
different
mean, I like, often government takes a sledgehammer approach instead of a scalpel like approach.
Yeah.
And there's a scalpel like approach that can work here, and it's not pushing money into the market via $15,000 tax credit for first time home buyers.
Yeah.
That is not, I don't think that's wisdom.
Well, let's go back to that 17% FHA, because I think you might be more nervous about that than I am. Are you nervous about that number?
I think so. What concerns me more is that they're both creeping up. So FHA is creeping up, as is over 90 days. So over 90-day delinquency, and delinquency just based on 90 days being a delinquent period, as opposed to your payment being due. Right.
Right.
So what I'm really talking about is I'm seeing both of those numbers creep up, and both of those numbers I think are creeping up because I think that we're starting to see the hits from jobs. And I think that those
Agreed.
hits from jobs is going to be, well, if I have a nest egg, yes, I'm going to keep my house. I'm going to stay in my house. But some people might say, you know what? Now's the time to just sell, and then we're going to rent.
Okay.
There could be that piece of it too.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to be really interesting to see is, are there going to be people that make that? Because that's a big jump. But
Yeah,
if you think the market's overheated, and if you think that, hey, I'm going to have to, my 8% cost to get rid of this house. But I don't want to go into forbearance, or I've been in forbearance for a year and now that's 10% of the house. So it's 18, but my property over the time that I've been here has appreciated 40%. I'll take my 20%.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
I've been here for more than 2 years, so I'm not going to owe any taxes on that. And so
Right.
I'm going to move into something where I can rent, and I can just let the market figure itself out over the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah, certainly could, but it's possible. I still think single family homes are going to be the best investment for the next decade. I think we're seeing Class A apartments suffer because you're seeing the best qualified leave that, get homes. You're seeing exit from city to suburbs.
Yep.
I think millennials are becoming buyers. I am not,
I agree.
I am zero concerned about inventory coming, except a few select markets.
Right.
I think nationally we're up 10% next year.
I think that that's certainly possible. I think the tough thing is that usually New York and California are drivers there.
Sure.
And I think they're the ones that are going to be hurt the most.
No. Yep. Oh, sir, dude, San Francisco is going to get smoked.
Oh, I mean, I remember 20 years ago, because I work in tech. So I remember 20 years ago going out to San Francisco and them showing me, this 2-bedroom condo, and it was $350,000. And now that's $1.2 million.
It is.
And it's like, that's not going to be the case when there's not, especially with all the tech that's relocating all around the country. And so I watch flows a lot. And what's really interesting is, so we always talk about, Mike, you and I always talk about how real estate is really localized.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's, the national numbers are nice and kind of good headlines on TV, but let's face it, Fresno inside and out. And so you only really care about Fresno and potentially where that next market is. So for me, I look at New Hampshire because it's a smaller state. So we've got about 1.4 million people in New Hampshire. I kid you not, that's the entire state population.
Damn, dude, Fresno's got about 1 million.
So. I know. They got just under 1 million, like 950, 960. Yep. And so the whole entire state's about, like I said, about 1.4 million. But what's really interesting about it is that New Hampshire is the only state that it has grown. It has more inflow of population in the last year than all of the other states combined.
Oh, wow.
Maine, all the other states combined in New England. So Maine,
oh, got it. Okay.
Vermont, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, and Massachusetts.
Got it.
That's a lot of states.
It is. And
so what's interesting is that the main difference between us and those other states is no income tax.
Well, that's a big deal. Tennessee, Texas, Florida,
Nevada, right? Too isn't
Nevada? Nevada. Yeah. That's going to become a thing, right?
Look at the inflows. Look at the inflows, and where does that then put the states that are high tax that people are running from?
Well, that's San Francisco's problem right there, right? All the tech jobs in office. When you have a company spending $93.5 million to break a lease. That might be a signal, I'm just saying. It just might be a signal.
The 2020 book of signals.
Yeah. Hint.
That's exactly.
Not good.
Yeah. I mean, oh my word. Imagine how they think the market looks like in the next 5 years
to pull that
that they would
trigger.
spend 93 million to break a lease. Holy cow.
Yeah, that's not good. Well, good, man. Anything else on this topic you want to talk about before we wrap this up and get on to topic number 2?
No, I think that covers everything.
Thanks, buddy. This has been a lot of fun. These are good.